Hi everyone, this is Selena Kraus and welcome to another LDRS Creative card video. In this video, we'll do some coloring using the hybrid inks and we're going to use the Cherry Blossom stamp set. So let's get started. So I have my Cherry Blossom stamp set and this is large 6x8 stamp set. It's wonderful. It's one of my favorite stamp set. I have a piece of watercolor paper that measures 4¼ by 5½. And we're gonna, at the end, we're gonna adhere it to a top folding card base. So let's get started. I'm positioning my stamp on top of, kind of hanging over the top of my watercolor panel. And I'll ink it. I'm using 3 colors here. I'm using the Raven Hybrid Ink, Coffee Bean Hybrid Ink, and Pink Tutu Hybrid Ink. And towards the end, I'll use a little bit of the Olive Hybrid Ink. So it's easier to work with cubes when we're inking image like this, where we're mixing couple colors, but I didn't have the cocoa bean ink cube, so I'm using the full ink pad. So I'm just adding, first I'm starting to apply the lightest color onto my stamp, then I'm moving towards the darker to the darkest. So I'm using only 2 colors here. So first I'm using the pink, then I'm using the pink tutu, then I'm using the coffee bean. I spritz it once or twice using just clean water into a spray bottle, and we're going to repeat this a few times because hybrid ink is not really water reactive. It's when you can use you can use hybrid ink for watercoloring in one bleed, so it doesn't really react with water. So that's why we need to build up those layers. So I'm repeating the process again, and I apologize. You see only one of my arms here, and I'm working only with one arm. One hand, my other one is in a sling. So another proof that you can do this card using only one hand. That's why I'm using as well the stamp positioning tool. It kind of serves me as another hand. As well, it helps when you're stamping multiple layers to be in the exact same position. But because we're gonna stamp at the end, we're gonna stamp over with black ink. So this doesn't really, you can do some coloring outside the lines and you'll have that bleed effect using this technique when you spray with water. So it's more kind of more forgiving technique. So next I'm smooshing some of the inks. So I'm using the pink tutu and olive, and I'm grabbing a water brush with a water barrel, and I'm picking some ink and coloring within those pink lines. And I'll add some olive, and I'll add, at the end, I'll add some coffee bean onto the branches. So as you can see, this is very forgiving technique, and it's all kind of artistic. It's more forgiving, and you can color, you can go outside the lines, and the beauty is, as somebody said, the beauty is in the mess. I'm more kind of OCD person, so I want everything to be within the lines and precise, but I really like this technique. So I'm adding that green. Kind of randomly here and there. I color the leaves and then I add it to the branch, and next I'm adding that coffee bean hybrid ink. So you can see here, this doesn't really look like much. It looks like very kind of smushed and very muddy. But once we stamp over with black ink, you will see the change. So I'm just going to clean my stamp here and kind of dry it off. And I will let this panel dry. You can heat set it, but I just let mine dry. And next I'm using the Raven Hybrid Ink. I inked up my stamp. You need to make sure that your image is completely dry before you move on to this step. And stab it a few times. If you're using hot press watercolor paper, probably one stamp it will be fine. I'm using cold press and it's more textured watercolor paper. So I needed few go around to get nice and nice impression, so that ink goes into the creases of that watercolor paper. So I think this looks good. So I'm just gonna clean my stamp, and then it's time to stamp the sentiment. I'm using the sentiment from the same stamp set. I'll use hugs and then the small line that says hope you feel better soon. So I'm stamping again hugs with the Raven Hybrid ink. Again, I'm stamping it a few times because I'm using textured watercolor paper, cold press watercolor paper. So 3 times it's proved to be fine. For this watercolor paper, I'm just going to remove that stamp from my stamp positioner and position the second stamp that says hope you feel better soon. So I'll pick it up with the lid of my stamp positioner, ink it up with black ink. And I think because this was more kind of detailed stamp, it's smaller, the first stamp went fine. So I just needed to stamp it once. Next, I'm using some fan foam. I applied liquid adhesive and I'll adhere it on the back of my watercolored panel. So I'll put something heavy. I'm using a huge acrylic block here to hold it down so it doesn't warp from the moisture of the adhesive. Next, I have a top folding note card that I've pre-made. I usually pre-make those and keep a stack on my desk. And I use the stamp positioner to kind of position that, line it up, because it was really hard to do with one arm. So next I'm adding some clear and enamel dots to finish off my card. And I'm using again liquid adhesive. This adhesive dries clear. So any adhesive that dries clear you can use to add enamel dots. So we're done here. Thanks for watching and see you soon in another video. Bye!